everyone, this is Sarah Berman and you are watching Practically Writing. Today we are going to be talking about dialogue. I do have a few announcements afterwards, so stay tuned for that. Dialogue is one of those parts of writing that so many authors and writers have a lot of trouble with. So we're going to be talking about the variety of issues that commonly come up. If you have any specific questions about things that we don't cover, go ahead and drop them below and I will either make another video going into detail on that or I'll just answer. Who knows? The first major problem that comes up in dialogue is that authors can tend to write it in a more formal type of writing. This is something that kind of comes about when you read a lot of classics and you want to mimic that, which is fine if you're doing period pieces. You know, if you're doing Regency romances or historical fiction and essentially your characters are upper class, probably British, then yeah, you can have that more formal dialogue. If the setting is appropriate, if the context is appropriate, then yes, you can have that more formal dialogue. But when you have two friends talking, then they're going to use contractions, they're going to use slang, they're going to use a lot of jargon and stuff like that. They're not going to be like, I cannot believe the possibility that this could have ever occurred. Yeah, that's not how people talk. The result is you end up with a really stilted way of your character speaking. The best way to solve this is to just start thinking very carefully about how your own group interacts, your own group of friends. Step back and instead of participating in the conversation maybe as much as you do, listen to it. Listen to how people talk to each other. Listen to the beats and the wording that they use and try and bring that into your writing. The second major common issue is too little structure in the dialogue. And what that means is if you have two people just talking, there's a lot of, okay, yeah, so, how are the kids? Yeah, okay, well, cool, yeah, right, there's a lot of responsive dialogue, where you're making essentially noises to show people that you're paying attention. That is not necessary to write into your dialogue. Occasionally, yes, add a little flavor, add a little back and forth, yes, but we tend to do it a lot. We really do. In actual speaking, we tend to do that so much. So not as much as we do in real life. We also talk awkwardly. We make a lot of ums and huh and ooh, and like I myself notice that I do, okay, so, like all the time. You don't need to include anything like that in your dialogues, okay? Do not have a character start every sentence with, okay, so, or, right, or, like, people do a lot of different ones, and we don't need that. We don't need it. It does not need to be a transcript of what an actual person would say. The other aspect to this is tightening up our dialogue. Two people may hem and haw and kind of, to get to an actual point. We do a lot of social dancing. We do a lot of social maneuvering. Sometimes we can cut that out. We may want to imply that it still happens. That's great. So those are things to consider to tighten up that dialogue. Nobody wants to hear a couple of people go, ooh, yeah, back and forth. The fourth issue that I see a lot of is people tend to write dialogue in a vacuum. there are two ways to do this. One is you have people going back and forth. He said this, she said this, he said this, she said this. They might switch up the dialogue tags, said being the dialogue tags. You can also use things like replied or extrapolated. So you have dialogue tags and you have dialogue, and the dialogue might be great and the dialogue tags might be great, but they're not doing anything. That's just not how people are. You don't sit there and talk like you're not doing anything. I mean, even I'm talking to my computer right now. There's a camera there and I'm still moving. I'm still doing things. They're out to dinner, okay? They take bites of food. Instead of describing the food when it comes, they get their food. They're still talking. You know, Sally says, as she takes a bite of salad, intersperse the actions because people do stuff. Yeah, you don't have to tell every little detail of what people do, but just kind of give a little flavor to their actions, you know, to what they're doing, to how they're interacting, and make it appropriate, you know. John scowled as he chomped down on a French fry. Arr. You know, they're having a fight now. Ooh. And he's taking it out on his French fry, because don't we all, right? That's what we do. We act out how we're feeling about things. And to ignore that during dialogue is going to remove an entire dimension from your characters. Give them some action while they're talking. Let them do stuff while they're talking. Number 5 is rhythm. And this one's difficult because it's something that we do naturally, but we don't do it like 100% of the time in conversation. So it's really hard to get good examples of it. The best way I can explain it is if you have, you know, you have a friend or even 2 other friends that you can observe, which is totally better if you can just sit back and observe this. You have 2 people who kind of go back and forth. Maybe they've known each other for so long, or they're just so close that, you know, they they got the banter going, they finish each other's sentences, they lob that ball back and forth, and it's like a beautiful thing to watch. Seriously. There's a certain rhythm to that. Capturing that rhythm in dialogue is key to showing good connections between the characters, because people will recognize these beats. You know, you have like this rhythm of back and forth, and it's so difficult to explain it because it's not consistent, and you want different rhythms for different aspects, but you know when you've nailed it because you're like, wow, this is good dialogue, if you're thinking about it consciously. Truthfully, if it's good dialogue, people aren't even going to notice it, and that's beautiful. So you have to pull yourself out of not noticing it. You know, you have to find really good dialogue, consciously think, hey, this is so good, I'm not even noticing it, and then you have to evaluate that. And once you do that, once you start finding these things, then you can find those rhythms. But they're beated, they're almost metrical. I'm sure somebody has figured it out that, you know, there's like XYZ beats for, you know, this kind of conversation or whatever. But when you nail that rhythm, when you nail that beat, that kind of back and forth, then it feels right. And number 6 is probably one of the easiest ones to fix, and that is to give your characters individual voices. What this means is your characters don't all talk the same, and they certainly don't all talk the same as you do. You have a character who has a little more arrogance, and so you have to put a little snootiness into everything that she says. Or you have a character who maybe he's been living on the streets for years. That's right, I'm talking about you, hound dog. You know, he drops a lot of consonants. He kind of goes with the street slang. you've got this one guy who, came up from the south, so he's got a little, southern drawl to some of his phrasing, or, things like that. But you have to have a clear understanding of not only who these characters are visually, but how they behave during their conversation, so you can do the actions, right? But also the way in which they speak. Is it somebody who is aggressive and is constantly getting, in your face? That person is going to have shorter sentences, more abrupt language. If you have somebody who hems and haws, they're going to have longer sentences, and they're going to kind of, really draw things out and probably say things that are really qualified, which means that they use words like I think and maybe and probably and, So you have to bring these things into each character. You have to know what each character sounds like. And what they sound like should be at least complementary to their personality. If you have a really aggressive personality, they're probably not going to be the really drawn out, maybe kind of people. So, they should probably not say things that are just kind of, meandering. If you have somebody who has more insecurities, they're going to use more questions. They're going to end things questiony, like they're not really sure. And there's actually a word for this kind of thing, but I don't remember it. So, you want to bring out their personalities within their language. You want to bring out their history, their culture, their environment, their background. Who they are should be reflected, at least in part, by how they speak. And that's going to be different for everyone. So you really want to think about what kind of words people like that use. What kind of sentences? Is it short and abrupt? Is it long? Are they snippy? Are they, just reluctant to speak many, many syllables? What do they say and how do they say it? Reflect that in your dialogue. Not enough dialogue tags. And I totally understand this, because you end up with this he said, she said, he said, she said, he said, she said. But I guarantee you would rather have too many he said, she said, John said, Sally said, whoever said. You would rather have too many of those than to confuse your reader for a moment. Even a moment. Oh, there's a reason why. Don't worry. There is a good reason why. Anytime you confuse your reader to the point where they have to stop and think about what they're reading, you've pulled them out of the story. Do not let them be pulled out of the story. Make sure that you explain things well enough that they are not pulled out of the story. If that means that you have two females talking, you can't just be like, she said, she said, she said, she said. You're going to have to overuse these names. You're going to have to be like, the blonde woman said, or, other significant descriptors to change it up. But you're going to have to use them, because it is going to be way too easy for the reader to be going back and forth and going back and forth and then be like, wait, who was I on? I had it there for a second. Oh, man. And then you have to go back. Don't do it. And the last thing is, there are a few things that you should just cut out of dialogue, either completely or like 90% of it. Imply that you're making small talk, or, cut it down to one little itty bitty bit of small talk or something like that. But make all of the dialogue pertinent. So if you're going to bring things up, have like a point of view, internal dialogue going on at the same time. So Katie called up her mom, and she knew that her mom was going to be upset if she asked her for money. So her mom had mentioned that her grandmother was sick, so she wanted to make sure that, grandma wasn't still sick before she put this extra burden on her, or, things like that. bring the characterization. Why are they talking about these specific social dance dialogues? Why are they doing this specific thing when that's not actually what the conversation is about? You don't want to completely cut out all unnecessary dialogue. That does not sound real. We all know that when you call up your mom to ask her for money, you have to play the game however, your family plays the game in order to broach this particular subject. Now, this is really common in the West because we have major issues with talking about money. The other thing that you want to cut pretty seriously is cussing. Now, I am not a prude by any means. I actually drop F-bombs in all of my books, pretty much. Like, at least half of them. Not the short stories, really, but... the thing is, what you want your dialogue to be 2 levels cleaner than the implication. So, if you've got somebody who cusses every other word, then they better be somebody that you want people to have that opinion on. And yes, it's a very prudish kind of opinion, but you're talking about average audience. They may not be throwing the book down because you drop an F-bomb, but there's going to be harsher judgment with somebody dropping an F-bomb in dialogue in a book than there would be just, it's slipping out. So you want to take that into account. You want to cut it by at least half. So if you have somebody who cusses a lot, cut their cussing down in half, and they're still going to be perceived as cussing a lot. This is just a piece of advice from me to you. Make those F-bombs really count. Seriously. Drop a couple, make them count. They should not become like the common word. I've seen people who have commented that, well, obviously they cuss because, it's dark and gritty. Don't just throw in a whole bunch of F-bombs and be like, oh, look, it's dark and gritty. Nobody's going to fall for that. I've seen people try. It really doesn't work very well. Throw in a few F-bombs, but not nearly as many as would be real. Okay, that is all I have for you for now. So we've covered the big stuff, and let me know if you have any questions about this or other questions about dialogue. These are the things that I think about when I'm writing my dialogue. These are the things that I keep in mind when I'm writing my dialogue. Announcements. I am going to be super busy this next month. Oh my gosh. I have a writers conference and an online convention that will be taking place the weekend of the 6th, 7th, and 8th. And one of them is an online convention, so I will be putting links below so you can check that out. It's going to be good. It's the Brains to Books SciCon, and I believe that's mostly taking place on Facebook. There's going to be a lot of really great authors there. I've seen some of the people that they've got working with this. Awesome people. So I'm really looking forward to that. In the meantime, I'm also going to be putting together my workshop because I've been asked to teach a workshop on selecting one's genre for the Writers Conference. Yay! On the 20th, the 21st, and the 22nd, I am going to be running a table and 3 discussion panels for the Nebraska Writers Guild at Constellation Con 9 from Outer Space. So that's going to be a lot of fun and really busy. So those 2 weekends, I am pretty much going to be gone, off the grid, out of touch. I'll try and respond to messages during that time, but it'll probably be significantly delayed from my usual response time. Feel free to message me, feel free to ask questions, feel free to give me suggestions on future vlogs. And make sure you check out all of the links. You can still support me on Patreon. You can still follow me on Facebook and Twitter. You can still buy Too Wyrd and Fluffy Bunny from the Rune Spells series. You can still get Her Favorite Mistake and His Precious Undoing from the Hot Fae Nights series under my pen name of Lena Grace. And I have 3 short stories going into anthologies sometime before the middle of the year. So, stay tuned for all of that. And we will see you next time. Don't forget to like and follow. Don't do it. Do not do that. Goddamn piece of shit motherfucking fucker. Fuck, 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 fuck. I sound like a chihuahua. I sound like a cussing chihuahua. Nobody wants to do that.